Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Before I start, if you haven't already signed the guest book, please do so before you leave today. I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the family. We're having the celebration of life for Keith. And I'm sure we all have memories, we all have thoughts, good thoughts. And that's what we're here to express today. For those who don't know me, and by the look in the audience, there's a lot. My name's Alec Graham. I am a resident of River Heights. And I was asked to MC this service, and it was an honor to accept it and be part of the program. A couple of housekeeping items. In case you need the washrooms, they're right at the back behind you. And Dwayne, he's the doorman back there. He'll make sure you get to the right one. I ask that if you have cell phones, if you shut them down or at least turn off your ringers, just so it doesn't bother the speakers. Or the speaker, me. There will be a family lunch here after the service is done, and for the family and invited guests. Those residents here, lunch will be as usual in the dining room at 12:30, and that's where the main dining room is. After the eulogy, Brent will invite everyone who wishes to share a memory, a thought, a good feeling will be asked. If you want to come up, you'll be welcome to do that and express that. Following the service, the family and invited guests will have lunch in this dining room, and so we ask that you socialize a little bit, but be aware that we need to convert this room back to eating. And you can do so just outside the room here. There's lots of chairs. Don't worry, it's the place to mingle. As I have the podium, I have a few thoughts about Keith, and since I'm first up here, I'm going to take my chances. Keith joined the River Heights Terrace family in 2022, and he got his scooter, which, if you noticed outside the door, is his scooter, and with his yellow helmet, you wouldn't lose him on the street. You don't lose him in the Heights here either. His scooter is red, so is mine. We both wanted red ones, and we both wanted convertibles. So that's what we got. We got convertibles. When we did go out, there was pretty well one destination we went to, and that's where we went. That's where we ended up every trip, no matter where. We'd be at the South End Mall, or we'd be down here at the Tim Hortons on Victoria. Didn't matter. Keith walked in. There's no saying, "What do you want, Keith?" "I'll have an iced cap and an old-fashioned donut." That was it. Tasteless. Tasteless. That was Keith. That's what he enjoyed. That's what he got. We became scooter buddies. It became a hobby with Keith and I, and we traveled throughout Brandon. We had a limited amount of mileage to go on our particular models, which was about 30 kilometers we could travel from here to wherever. Wherever ended up down at the ice cream shop down on Rosser, the far end. I don't know if you guys have been there. I don't
Crows.
know. Pardon?
Crows?
Crows. Yeah, we were down there. I couldn't believe we'd get there and back, but what the hell we did. Keith was always worried about not seeing in the back, seeing out of his mirrors. One trip we had, he said, "Alec, I can't use my mirrors. I can't look around." He said, "I want to go to A&L Cycle." And I thought, "Oh no, we're not buying a bike. We're not gone." He wanted to get one of those attached little mirrors to go on his helmet. I think he saw that on some bike show or something, but he got one. I'm not sure what he saw because we tried to use it when we were in the store buying it. And I said to Keith, "Just get it over there, get the fella to stick it where you want." And I stood back about 5-10 yards. I said, "Keith, can you see me?" I said, no, just look straight ahead, but look at your mirror." Anyway, we talked about it and he ended up buying it. I'm not sure how often he wore it, but that was Keith. Keith was, as I said, a traveler. We got caught twice in the rain. Not a good thing when you're driving a convertible. No. First time, kind of late, a hot day as I recall. It was nice to get cooled off. Now the second time, when we left here, it was cloudy. Didn't look so good, but as it wasn't raining, we took off. We went down to the South End Mall. Clouds didn't go away. We turned around and came back. We got to 7-Eleven on 34th and Vic. Skies opened up. We got soaked. Keith leading us. He said, "I'm heading over to Sobey's Canopy. That's where we're going to get under. We're going to stay dry." Sure enough, the lights turned green, and away went Keith. I was hot on his trail. Hot on his trail. We got there, and there was two ladies waiting for us. One was Angie, Keith's daughter. The other was my daughter, Jennifer, and both independently came looking for their dad. We were okay. We had a good laugh about it, and we worked out all right. As a recruiter, Keith was hot to trot to enlarge our group of 2, and he did so in the building here. He got Dave, and he got Mike Lowe, both residents here, to join our group. So now we had 4 of us. It looked like a parade. We're going down the street, we all had flags on the top of our machines, and we got compliments, we got some strange looks too. We enjoyed it. It was good camaraderie. We just had a good time. Keith was very proud, as you can see here in the pictures, of his military service. If you sat with him for lunch, you heard all about it. It was interesting, and he was receptive to your stories if you could get a word in. Keith was Keith was more to me than just a friend. He was my scooter buddy. I won't forget him. Rest in peace, Keith. I'll now call upon Angie to continue with the service. Angie, take it over, please.
It was awesome. By the way, they were soaked, but they had grins to hear. They were like these kids that were caught. It was perfect. We were kind of worried. They're out on that scooter in this rain, and they were soaked. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just going to start this off. I'm going to try my best. It's not really overwhelming because I know how many people were important to him. So we'll start with some of his background. Raymond Keith Delmage passed away at Brandon General Hospital on Sunday, December 8th, 2024, at the age of 80 years, after a long battle with cancer. He is survived by his children, Angela Lee Doherty, Meade Delmage, my husband Gary, his grandchildren Caitlin and husband Jesse, Brian, his girlfriend Danny, Tracy Lee Delmage, Brent Cogan, Karen, his wife Elizabeth and Lauren, his granddaughters Emily and Raven, Rachel, his daughter Charlene, Nee Cogan, her partner John, grandsons Brendan and Ashley, and great-granddaughter Dominica, and grandson Ty and Reese, and our sister Sherry. Sorry, our sister Sherry passed away. Also survived by his sisters Janice Wachowski, Pam Campbell and Ken, Val Wickdahl and Earl, many nieces and nephews, Dave, Matt and Kim, Ryland, Jaden, Brooklyn, Miles, Dane, Wendy and Craig, Connor, Brittany, Maverick, Brandon, Jenny, Whitney, Paul, Maya, Ella, Colleen, Leslie, Corrine, Terrace, Erica and Dylan. So many other people whom we consider extended family and mean the world to us. And Dad, Lori, one of his caregivers, Gib and Lynn, Dorothy, Uncle Bill, Greg, Alex, Dave, Richard, they like to talk about food at the table, Stuart, and many, many more here from the terrace. Vernon Ruth, Leona and Dawn, Carol Delmage and daughter Sherry Cogan, who's deceased. His BC family, Joanne, Tim, grandson Kobe, Terry, grandson Tyler, Gord, Jerry and Diane, Ed, Dave, George, and so many, many more. Dad was predeceased by his parents, Ernie and Ruth Delmage, his brother-in-law, Norman, and Mighty Maxwell, who helped him get to his next adventure. Now I'd like to ask Brent to give the eulogy.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Brent Cogan, Keith's stepson, but I want you to know that we never use the word step in our family. Keith was my dad, and Angie and Tracy are my sisters. Keith was born at his grandparents' house, Alfred and Edith Kirby, in the small village of Sedgeford, Kingsland County, Norfolk, England, on October 24th, 1944. To eldest Ernest Charles Delmage and Emma Ruth Delmage, formerly Kirby. His Nana was a midwife, and he came so fast she caught him in her apron, apparently. Keith was 4.5 months old when he finally met his father for the first time after D-Day. So, at 18 months of age, 5 months after Ernie had returned from overseas, Keith and his mother followed, embarking on their journey to Canada on the ocean liner, the Aquitania, used as a troop ship. 6 days later, Ruth and Keith arrived at Halifax, Nova Scotia, at Pier 21. A little slower boats back then, I guess. The next day, they boarded the train for the 3-day journey to Winnipeg. They were met by Ernie and his family at the train station in Winnipeg. Later that day, the young family left Winnipeg on a Greyhound bus for Minnedosa. The family lived on the Ross farm in the Cameron district, next to Fred and Flora Guggen, who were great support to the family, but especially to Ruth and Keith, who they introduced to Cameron community families and helped them adjust to life in Canada. That fall and winter, they stayed with Alice Delmage, Ernie's mom, in Minnedosa. In 1947, Ernie and Ruth bought great-grandfather Charles Delmage's homestead in that Cameron district. The family settled in, and Keith started school in Cameron. He remembers being teased because he still had an English accent. Keith was the eldest of 4. Janice Elaine, born in 47. Pamela Lynn in 1951. And Valerie Ruth in 1952. Keith loved the farm, the animals, and the freedom of country life. He grew up loving to hunt and fish, and in later years was quite the outdoorsman. Although Keith loved farm life, he also learned that it was a hard life. When Keith was 10, his dad worked for the Department of Defense, Minto Armories in Winnipeg. When his dad left for Winnipeg in 1954, his dad said to him that he was now the man of the family and to take care of his mom and girls. Keith took his responsibilities very seriously and was always at his mom's side, helping her in the garden, milking cows, feeding the animals, looking after his 3 sisters, and worst of all, taking out the toilet can to dump it in the bush, a job he hated with a passion. I can't imagine. Keith had a creative side to him. He could always be found copper tooling, building model airplanes, or model ships, or drawing in pencil and in ink. When his little sisters would sneak into his room to play with his model airplanes and ships, there was always a huge price to pay afterwards, as Keith wouldn't allow anyone into his room, which was always kept in pristine condition. Apparently that changed later in life. Keith also played the guitar. He was self-taught and spent hours practicing on the guitar and composing his own songs. In high school, he helped form a band. Often the band members would be in the farm kitchen jamming and practicing their music. A song that was always heard was a song by Richie Valens called "Oh Donna." But of course, each band member changed the name to coincide with their girlfriend of the day. Keith joined the Canadian Armed Forces as a cadet in 1960 at the age of 15 with the 12th Manitoba Regiment Militia, which launched him into his future military career. His best recruit award was one he was extremely proud of. Keith's dad left the reserves in 1961 and returned to the farm. Keith continued to help with the farm chores, but in 1963 he left the farm and farm life and transferred to the regular force with the 2 PPCLI and served with the regiment until 1966 in CFB, Canadian Forces Base, Edmonton. In January 1966, he remustered to the Canadian Royal Canadian Dental Corps, RCDC, initially as a clerk, then as a dental assistant. So he started the military jumping out of planes, and he didn't think he could do that long term. Probably right. In 1965, he married his high school sweetheart, Leona Nelson. His next posting was to Montreal, Quebec in 1968. Angela Lee was born. There was no family around, and with the hospital staff that did not speak English. Their next posting was to CFB Cornwallis, Nova Scotia, where Tracy Lee was born. In 1974, Keith, Angela, and Tracy moved to CFB Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, where Keith embarked on life as a single dad. He cut their hair short because it was easier to take care of. I'm sure that was nice. Enrolled them in brownies, dance classes, and skating lessons. Angie and Tracy have memories of their daddy having tea parties at the little table with Dad in his uniform drinking tea with a little cup with his baby finger.
Yeah.
And talking in an English accent. Every Wednesday was grocery shopping day, which ended in a trip to Dairy Queen. He played his guitar and sang songs with them at bedtime, and I'm sure they kept saying, "Just one more, Daddy." In 1975, Dad went to his next love, met his next love, Carol Cogan, that's my mom, and her son Brent, that's me, and daughters Charlene and Sherry. In 1976, Dad was posted to CFB Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we became the Brady Bunch family. They were married in January 1978, and in August, Dad was posted to CFB Lahr, West Germany. The next 5 years were some of Dad's fondest memories. Swim team, cross-country skiing, some traveling, and raising 4 teenagers. Us kids joined the swim team mainly because the local pool was closed for repairs, and the only way we could continue to swim was to join the team. But it turned out to be a great thing for our family. Since Dad and Mom got very involved with the team, eventually Dad even became the swim team president. We did a lot of cross-country skiing we did a little cross-country skiing as a family, but that sport is a lot of work. So only Dad continued after the first season. And of course, he became very good taking the sport pretty seriously. We made 2 trips to England to visit family. Both times we drove in our orange Volkswagen bus and took the ferry from Belgium. I think it was a 6-hour ferry ride. We saw the changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace in London, the beautiful Lake District, Scotland, and everything in between. Raising 4 teenagers came with its challenges. Luckily, our swim team training every day really tired us out, so during the week we were all pretty good. The weekends, however, may have been a little more challenging. In 1982, Tracy moved back to Canada to live with her mom, and in June 1983, the rest of the family moved back to Canada. Angie and Brent moved to Manitoba, and Charlene, Mom and Dad were posted to CFB Trenton, Ontario. And he culminated his career at the clinic, as the clinic coordinator at CFDSS, Canadian Forces Dental Service School at CFB Borden, near Barrie, Ontario. Master Warrant Officer R.K. Dalmage retired from the Canadian Forces in March of 1988 after 25 years of service. Okay, so here are some words that were written in a letter to him from Brigadier General J.F. Bajang after his retirement. I wish to extend to you my personal thanks for the years that you have given to the Royal Canadian Dental Service. I was always impressed by your ability to project an image of a good soldier. That is to say, you always conducted yourself with dignity, your compartment was always correct. Does anybody know what that means? Your dress was without fault, and your ability to relate to all those with whom you worked at all ranks levels was noteworthy. I felt that you were an excellent spokesman for the dental assistant occupation. You offered yourself as an exemplary role model for the new entrants into the dental assistant occupation. There are many accolades that we have found in Dad's treasures. After retirement, Keith began a career in real estate with his wife Carol in Barrie, Ontario. However, in 1990, Dad packed up his Ford truck and moved out to Kelowna, British Columbia, with the plan to enjoy the outdoors once again. He eventually settled in Creston, BC. Here are some memories that were sent by Joanne Dalmage, who Dad met in 1991, and they married in 1992. She says, in 1992, the year after we met, I was mapping out the Kettle Valley rail bed for Tourism Barrie, and we made an adventure out of it. Keith and I moved into the bush with his old Ford truck and canopy on it. We lived in it for 3 months, just going home to wash up and restock. One time, Keith said, "What is that smell?" I said, "I think it's us." We had some scary adventures, such as falling off the mountain, driving over a trellis 200 feet below the canyon, I think. Keith had a strange sense of humor. One time we were parked in the neighbor's yard, and Keith was in Doug's shed. I heard a noise, looked around, and there was Keith with a rubber arrow through his head. He was laughing so loud, and I lost it. Later, Keith told me about tricks he used to play on Janice. Keith loved to cross-country ski. Sorry, there's no details. Many nights with a full moon, we would ski to the river, stopping on the way, brewing a cup of tea, and watching the world go around. We had a few adventures with Keith's buddy Gord. Gord had a dirty old rickety car which Gord loved to tinker with. This is a good story. One day on a dirt bush road, they decided to go up this hill. On the way down, Gord says, "Oh my gosh, I have no brakes." So they have this bright idea: let's tie some old logs on the back of the fender of the car to slow the car down. Well, the logs were bouncing and going faster than the car. Keith was yelling, "Go faster, Gord, go faster." Keith often said, "I'm not going out with Gord again," but they had many more adventures together. I'm not sure which one's the crazy one in that story. Keith had a great passion for canoeing. Two highlights that come to mind: the Bowron Lakes 8-day circular canoe trip with many portages. Tim and Tyler joined us on one trip. We were always going to do this trip, but we were always going to do it one more time. Another great memory: Keith's 60th birthday party. There was a knock on the door. Keith says, "Hello, young lady. Who are you?" Emily, my daughter, his granddaughter, said, "I'm your birthday present." Keith says, "Emily?" Then me, Angie, and Tyler came from around the corner. That was a good surprise. It's harder when it's personal. A mystery dinner was planned that evening, and everyone came dressed up in their roles to play. Keith was the macho soccer player with a gold chain around his neck. Keep in mind, some of Keith's children had never met my children, so Joanne's children. We had a great time, a good icebreaker. Next morning for breakfast, everyone met who was actually who. Every week, Keith, Dieter, Gord, and Ed would go hiking. Keith has many pictures of his adventures. Keith was happiest when he was outdoors. We have great memories of all our many great adventures. In his later years, he had always wanted to move back to his roots in Manitoba. Okay, so two of his friends in Creston, BC, Jerry and Diane, sent these words. He was very knowledgeable about politics and the goings-on in the world. I used to call him to get his expert view on things. Many times we'd have him over for supper when Joanne was away. We shared supper, some wine, good company, most often a fire, and a game of washers. He loved it, and so did we. He was an excellent storyteller. We enjoyed listening to him tell adventures and dangerous stories, like cars with logs, when he and Joanne were in their prime. Now, Angie, Dad's eldest daughter, would like to say a few words.
If I can. Thank you, Brent. As you've heard, Dad's career took him all over Central and Eastern Canada. 5 wonderful years in Germany, and 30 plus years in beautiful British Columbia. Moving back to sunny but cold Manitoba was not necessarily in his game plan, but moving back to be with his girls and family to get to know his grandchildren was important to him. In January 2022, Dad moved back to Manitoba and found a wonderful community at River Heights Terrace. His first meal here at River Heights was one of the first meals served in the dining room after the pandemic. I think all of you had to adjust to get to know each other all over again. I feel he was truly part of that. Dad moved to Brandon with only one set of friends in here and left with so many wonderful friendships, and we thank you for that. His 3 years here at River Heights Terrace was good for him. Even though Dad wanted to be back in his own place with a yard and a car and a workshop, he was happy to be here. He would pull off with Tori and he'd look at this building and say, it really is a nice place. You did good, kiddo, picking this out. He may not have loved all the meals, but he sure appreciated all the waiters, waitresses, cleaning staff, and the entire staff for their hard work. He spoke of how dedicated you all are and how many different roles you had to play each day. He was really impressed with Riel. I don't know if he's here right now. He's the one that's out in his suit right now. One moment he was in his work clothes fixing a leaky faucet, and by noon he would be in a suit helping serve lunch. He would comment on how sharp Riel looked in a suit. Sometimes after we had a long morning of shopping or a long day traveling in and out of Winnipeg, when we pulled up in front of the doors, he would say, "It's good to be home." We were glad he was back here and he could call it a home. It was hard for him. When he first came, he felt like he was one of the young ones and didn't need a walker or any help. But we all witnessed on how his Parkinson's, I apologize, he did not pass away with cancer. I think I said that. We all witnessed how his Parkinson's really progressed fast and how he eventually struggled with some of his daily tasks. This past year was quite a struggle with Dad's botched eye surgery, pacemaker surgery, countless doctor's appointments, and the progression of his Parkinson's. I could see you all helping him with whatever you could. There have been many people who have come and gone from here, and I want to say as a visitor, I truly feel how much each and every one of you care for one another. We all miss those who have already left, and we will certainly cherish all of you in this wonderful community. I've heard your kind words and loving support. You have all made this a little easier to live through. So many of you here at River Heights became as close as friends, and I feel like I have another extended family now, especially his soccer gang. His scooter gave him freedom, and I'm glad he never rolled it, although he came close sometimes. It broke my heart when his eyes were failing him too, making it difficult for him to venture out on that scooter. Thank you for making this chapter of Dad's life here a truly memorable one. Lyndon Gibb, your friendship meant the world to Dad, and your visit in the hospital really warmed his heart. The fact that he remembered so much, including the name of your dog back in 1971, showed how much his mind was still sharp, but his body was giving out. There are so many people I want to thank from the bottom of my heart for all the love and support you've given us through all this. Cindy for giving him a shave. 2 hours before he passed, Cindy was standing with me, and he always said an Englishman needs to be cleanly shaven. So Cindy gave him a shave, and he looked like a gentleman, brushed them all up. He was great. I thank you for that. I hope he knows how much we admired his courage for battling through this disease. I think it broke him a bit too to realize all the things he couldn't do. So I am happy that he is now finding a river to put his canoe on, a mountain trail to hike, a campfire to play his guitar around, a dance floor to whisk his pretty lady on, and free from everything that held him back. When a father is also a friend, advisor, and source of pride, a father is truly a blessing. His strength and support have always been there to guide, been there to light the way for me, and the lessons he taught me still guide me today. If someone asked me what a good man looks like, how he acts and treats others, how he puts his time into what really matters, I would just point to him and say, there's a good man. That's my dad.
So now I'm going to read a few words from my sister Charlene. Good afternoon, everyone. While I can't be here in person, I'm thankful to Brent for reading this as we celebrate my beloved stepfather, Keith Delmage, whom I've always called Dad. Dad entered my life when I was 7, become a constant source of love, guidance, and strength. We formed a blended family with Mom Carol, my brother Brent, and sisters Angela, Tracy, and our late sister Sherry. Our journey began in Winnipeg, moved to Germany for 5 unforgettable years, and settled in Barrie. Dad later chased his dreams in British Columbia. He had special ways of showing love, like the nickname Sharn, which I grew to love despite initial protests. Even with the distance, we kept close through calls, cards, and visits. Dad's humor was remarkable, lighting up a room. I'll miss our conversations, the laughter, and his infectious joy. Reflecting on his life, I'm grateful for the memories, the adventures, milestones, and simple moments. He was more than a stepfather. He was a guiding light and a source of endless love. Dad, I'll miss you profoundly. Thank you for your love, laughter, and presence. Your legacy will live on in our hearts. Rest in peace, Dad. I love you. I'm sad not to be there today caring for my partner John post-surgery in Barrie. My thoughts are with you as we honor Dad. Thank you all for being here. And then finally, I have some personal words to share. I met Dad when I had just turned 9. So Angie, Shar, and Shara were still 6. They were going to be 7 in a couple of months, and Tracy was 5. I remember I was working on a model in the living room, which was not something I actually did much of, but I remember Dad remarking once about that nerdy little boy that he met that evening. This was before being a nerd was cool, something I guess I grew into. But then Dad and the girls lived in, back then, Dad and the girls lived in Port-au-Prairie. Dad and my mom, met at PWP in Winnipeg, Parents Without Partners. I remember it was really easy to like Dad, or Keith at the time, and it was really easy to like Angie and Tracy. The 4 of us kids really hit it off. Lucky for me though, since I was the only boy, I was the oldest. And it did not take very long before we were like, as Angie said earlier, the mini Brady Bunch. We did a lot of things together, including camping at Ditch Lake. I learned to canoe with Dad. We did a lot of trolling for fish, but I remember waking up early some mornings when we were camping, and we do some casting for fish from that flat bottom fishing boat that he used to have. Back then, at least for me, the lines between hard work and fun were very much blurred. One time when we were camping at Ditch Lake, there was an algae problem at one of the small lakes that Dad and his dad, Grandpa Ernie, used to fish farm. So Dad and I went there with his canoe. Dad tied a blue stone with a rope to the back of the canoe, and we dragged it through that little lake with the canoe. I remember it was windy, and there were some pretty big waves, and it was hard work for that little 10 or 11-year-old boy that I was. But what fun it was to be my dad's right-hand man and doing adult-type work with my dad. Another great memory I have, also camping, is when we would scoop up the crayfish that would gather around the boat overnight. Dad would cook them up like mini lobsters, and it was pretty good. Of course, lots of butter and garlic makes everything pretty good. I learned to water ski with Dad on Clear Lake. He explained what I had to do to get up on those skis from a sitting position on the edge of a dock. And that worked pretty well, but I fell pretty soon after. And then I was able to get up again even though I was in the middle of the water, but again I went down pretty quickly. But it didn't take long before I got pretty good at this water skiing. And the most fun we had was water skiing at Lake Brereton. Dad had that flat bottom fishing boat with only a 25 horse motor on it, but he made it work. I guess it helped that, again, I was only 10 or 11, maybe 100 pounds or so. Dad would go pretty fast and turn the boat back and forth, and I would pull so hard on that rope and try to get even with the boat, and then he'd turn and I'd cross the wake and do it again on the other side. Full power on all the time. What a great time that was. And we've got the pictures to prove it. We tried to get Dad up on the skis, but I think being a full-grown adult was not working in his favor for that little boat and that small motor. I think my mom was driving, and we would try to move to the front of the boat to try to compensate, but it just wouldn't work. Too bad. That would have been fun too. So I mentioned that us kids got along pretty well. Well, one time, Dad wanted to teach us all a life lesson. He brought out 4 unmarked paper bags, 3 large ones and 1 small one. I guess he thought we would fight over who would get stuck with the small one. But I thought to myself, if I choose the small bag and it's full of crap, the girls will just share with me. And if my bag is full of good stuff and the large ones aren't, well, I'll just share with them. Dad's life lesson was foiled. The girls' large bags were full of crap and mine was full of jelly beans. So, we all had jelly beans. In the summer of 1978, we headed to Germany for 5 years. We were already family by then, and the word step was already not used to describe each other for a long time. Our time in Germany was wonderful. I was just old enough to realize how lucky we were. Heck, my grade 8 field trip was to Paris. I had another story about Dad when we were in Germany. So this time is about when he had my back on something, and I did trust him. We were lucky enough to rent this detached home when we were in Germany. Most people live in apartments. And apparently it was German custom to sweep the driveway and the walkways on the weekends. At least that's the story we were told. Anyway, I can confirm that it was quite tidy over in Germany, so maybe it was true. Anyway, the girls had the job of sweeping, and my job was to cut the grass. Sometimes if I was in a hurry to get the grass cutting job done, I would run while I was pushing the lawnmower and get the job done as quickly as I could. Well, I guess I made it look pretty easy. And I guess cutting the grass was cooler than sweeping sidewalks. So Angie goes to Dad one day and says, "Dad, it's not fair that Brent gets to cut the grass and we have to sweep. I want to cut the grass." As if Brent gets to cut the grass. Anyway, Dad says okay to Angie. But I don't want to sweep. Cutting the grass is cooler. So I say, "Come on, Dad, I don't want to sweep." He says, "Brent, trust me." Okay, I say, I have my doubts, but I did trust him. And apparently I did make it look really easy, but it was not easy. Angie could barely get the lawnmower up the steep ramp from the garage to the back of the yard. And then she could barely get the darn thing started. And apparently the yard was quite bumpy and it was on a slight hill. I never noticed. The next week, I was back cutting the grass. Score. Okay, one more story. Another day in Germany, I was with some friends outside the mini gym and the curling club. And of course, you all know about where that is. I had my giant ghetto blaster with me. 9D batteries this thing took. Anyway, I was playing Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or Saxon or something like that. And Dad says, "You know, you're not going to like all of that loud, heavy metal music when you grow up." Well, either he was completely wrong or I still haven't grown up. But I actually think he was wrong because I have grown up. And I have a lot to thank him for becoming, this is the hard part. for becoming the man that I am today. Later in my life, my relationship with Dad was even better. I have so many happy memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Dad was the best dad he could be, and he did a pretty good job. I'm so proud, and I'm so grateful for all that he did, for all of us. Mr. Raymond Keith Delmage was my dad, and I will always love him dearly. Thank you. Okay, so now I invite anybody else that might want to speak. Any other takers?
I think my wife Val and I would have to take the pride in saying we went to Creston on Angie's encouragement and brought him home.
Yes,
And that was pretty neat. We left on a Monday morning, we had him back here by Wednesday night. We had no idea what the hell was going on.
That's a good one.
Lynn edited them all out except one. You can't tell, Lars, I can't say that. Keith was... Keith was one of my best friends. I was in the Air Force, he was in the Army. He used to call me canaries. Too yellow to fight and too cute to shoot. I'm gonna try and get through this, but if I can't, then we'll take over. We first met Keith in 1971 when he, Leona, Angie, and Tracy moved their mobile home onto a lot behind us in Angus, Ontario, just outside Camp Borden. Over the next 4 years, we became friends and even put a gate up between our yards for easy access. It was a fence separating our two properties, and we put a gate in. Lots of great times and fond memories. Over the years, we were transferred to different bases, many miles and sometimes halfway around the world away.
We kept in touch, and whenever one of us was in the other's neighborhood, we would visit and catch up. It was always so much fun and like we'd never been apart. I was even able to visit Keith in Lahr, Germany when I was on a short layover there, I being Gib. In later years, after we both retired and Keith moved to BC, we still managed to keep in touch. In the mid-90s, we started vacationing each year in Fairmont, BC, which is only a couple of hours from Creston, where Keith had settled. He and Joanne would travel up each year to spend the weekend with us. We'd reminisce, play cards, and perhaps enjoy a glass of wine or two. We were always amazed to hear his canoeing adventures and all the preparations he put into planning the perfect trip, calculating how much each person would be able to carry and what their portion of dry food would be. He absolutely loved the remote experiences. He regaled us with so many stories. When he moved back to Brandon in 2022, Keith and Gib had many visits, which included trips to Tim Hortons for coffee and a sugary treat, and several luncheons together. Even though my hearing and Keith's struggle with talking clearly, we had many laughs as we reminisced. He really loved the freedom his scooter gave him during the mild summer months. We will miss him so much, but are comforted to know he's happily planning his next canoe adventure. Rest easy, my friend.
I was supposed to invite everybody to speak, and then I was gonna close with my words.
Oh.
So, I think we're done.
Like,
Well,
I got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Come on up.
So, I'm coming up. I'm Keith's favorite son-in-law. And this kind of ties in with an Angie story too. So Angie comes flying into the driveway. First she can hear it because the garage door comes open.
and she just scoots into that driveway like it's the back cave. And I've always given her shit about it. You should slow down. Someday you're gonna come right in the house. No. But now I know where she gets it from. Because I was in the garage cleaning some stuff up. And I look around the corner and I see Keith. Well, he's flying down there in the scooter. He comes flying over the curb. And he scoots right up and he goes, "Hi, how you doing?" I said, "Keith, you almost hit the tree." He goes, "Oh, almost." Like, which one though? Like, 'cause there's two. He just almost bounced off of both of them. So I was like, oh my God, you gotta slow down on that thing, Keith. So another time, I'm sitting in the garage and he comes flying up again. For you guys that don't know him, he had a real taste for Land Shark beer. And that was Angie's favorite, so he'd come over and have a Land Shark every once in a while. So he pulls up, "Got a Land Shark for me?" "I'll have to go look in the beer fridge, Keith." So I go in the house and, well, there's only these canned beers in there. And whatever. So I go outside, I go, "I got these canned beers, I've never had one before." So I give him one and I crack one. We sit in the lawn chairs and talking away and he goes, "This beer is not very good." I go, "Wow, yeah, it tastes kind of watery, doesn't it?" I'll have to give Angie shit for buying these. So Angie comes home and I go, "Why would you buy these beers?" She goes, "Gary, they're non-alcoholic." Keith just looks at me and, Land Sharks, remember, Land Sharks. Those are the two stories I just wanted to share with you. Anyway, thank you.
She's played many tricks on me on the phone.
This is Janice's oldest sister.
One I remember, and I'll never forget, he had a bird egg collection. He would kind of get wild bird eggs and blow them out. So one day he's doing that, and I said, "I want to do that." He said, "Oh, all right," he said. I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, poke a hole in each end, put it up to your mouth, and suck." Never asked to do it
Boy, you believe not, we'll see what happens. Keith and I first met here, the way a lot of us did. You see a new face and he's wandering around the hall looking lost. So we started to visit, and over the years, so it was 2.5 or so he's here, we learned a lot of things. He told me about the stories of his military career. The first one struck me was with the name Delmage. He moved into Quebec and they thought he was going to be francophone. And the whole department was just disappointed that he couldn't speak French. Another time, he was with a commanding officer and there was a guy in between, I can't remember. And anyway, they walked into the in-between guy's office and he's out. But hanging there is his man's shoulder bag. And the colonel goes, "What is that?" He says, "That's a merce, sir." He says, "Get it out of my sight." And then the rebel came out one time. He says he was on some sort of in-between posting. So somebody says, "You're in charge of coffee. We're gonna have meetings every day at 10:30. The first day he made coffee. The second day he made terrible coffee. The third day he made terrible coffee and he was never asked again. He also talked about his time in BC in the mountains and hiking with his buddies. And then he commented about how, he says, there came a time when I just thought my leg wasn't working right. And that was the beginning of discovering that he actually had Parkinson's. He talked about the express jet trip coming out here to live in Brandon. He really appreciated having both Tracy and Angie close at hand. That worked out really well for him. And again, I was struck that he never ever said the word step, talking about children. I find that amazing. What else did he do? Well, there came a time when we were, Bill Miller, myself, Keith, and there was always a fourth at the table, but the three of us guys would sort of learn to trade. Bill didn't like cucumbers, so he'd pass mine over out of his salad at lunchtime. Keith didn't like tomatoes, so Bill would take the tomatoes. And the staff actually learned to wait until we had done our exchanges before they started squirting salad dressing on things. So that worked out pretty well. The other one that we got to that point of being so familiar, we're acting like roommates actually, sharing back and forth and all the rest. Bill Miller had a penchant for nice, warm, fresh dinner rolls at lunch. And he often would ask for two. He puts one on his plate, he puts one on Keith's plate. And absentmindedly, Keith just reaches over and Bill unloaded on him. The look on Keith's face was priceless. He absolutely did not know what he'd done. He just, it was a reflex, you know, and, oh, we had lunch with that one a lot. We did talk about his condition and how it was declining. I think the first time he sat at dinner with me, he says, I don't mean to poke myself in the eyebrow, but this Parkinson's is a pain. And that's pretty much where it ended. But he was a great friend. And again, I watched him and his buddies go on the scooters, and you could see that it was just a new lease on life for him. He really, really appreciated that. So, for that, farewell, Keith. Bonus.
Very good, very good.
For those who don't know me, I'm Dave. I'm a scooter buddy. And along with Alec there, we did quite a bit of traveling. And I think he was with me on his last scooter ride. This was quite an adventure. He led the way over, I think, the bumpiest sidewalk in Brandon. And we made it to, guess where? Tim Hortons. And had our coffee and his ice cap, of course, and donut. On the way from there to here, which is not very far, he was having a little bit of trouble seeing. And so we slowed down a little bit but found out that he had to drive with one hand. And that was, I figured we better slow down a bit more. Because with the other hand, he was holding his eyelid up so he could see. He was very courageous and adventurous. He tried just about anything on, as I understand today. The scootering was probably the last big adventure for him. And so I got in on that, and I'm very glad I did. I found out today, though, that he was in very many places that I was. And Lahr, Germany, for instance, he was there after I was there, but he went to the same place. Same place in England. Same place in Ontario. I was in the Air Force, he was in the Army. How we managed to be at the same places, I don't know. But anyway, I didn't know him there, but I'm glad he was there, and I'm glad I became his friend, and he was a good friend of mine. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been an incredible turnout. So many friends and family. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to play this slideshow, and
Bree can have a donut.
and then yeah, there'll be donuts and coffee and cream soda.
And Rebels.
Oh yes, and Rebels.